What's the most WTF fact you know? Dead people can get goosebumps if they still have skin. The collars on men's dress shirts used to be detachable to save on laundry costs, as the collar was the part that needed the most cleaning. Trivago, Travelocity, and Orbitz are all owned by the same company, Expedia Inc. Trivago, Travelocity, and Orbitz are all owned by the same company, Expedia Inc. And they're all useless. And Airbnb is where it also owns, which is geared towards their Asian customers, but also lets you book anywhere in the world. Has better prices than the parent company half the time. The inside of a banana peel, when rubbed against a mosquito bite, can help numb the itching sensation. This is low-key useful NGL. They also feel like a real woman. Serial killer Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, never raped his victims because he felt that it was wrong to cheat on his wife. Some of those fellows are very strange. Richard Chase would never break into somebody's house. He'd let himself in if the door was unlocked. The way he rationalized it: if they didn't want to be murdered, raped, and eaten typically in that order, then they would have locked their doors. Purely hypothetically, I gotta say that's the order I'd prefer those things occur. About 760,000 children under the age of 5 die every year because of diarrhea. Part of the reason is that, especially in developing countries, the parents don't realize that you have to give a child more fluids when it has diarrhea. The parents incorrectly reason that the cause of diarrhea is too much fluid. So they stop giving the child fluids. And the kids die of dehydration. Joe Sun, who is best known for playing Random Task in the Austin Powers movies, was also an MMA fighter with an 0-4 record, including a loss at UFC 4 after being punched in the groin repeatedly. He was sentenced to life in prison after he kidnapped and gang raped a woman, and killed his cellmate while in prison. I'm more curious as to how he lost a fight if he was getting tagged in the groin repeatedly. That's beep ain't legal. This was in the early days of UFC, where the rules were much less restrictive. Flatworms stab each other with their penises and the loser of the battle becomes pregnant and the mother of the offspring. Nat Geo has a video of it. Flatworm penis fencing world's weirdest, YouTube. For flatworms, who's your daddy? Is a loaded question. In a bizarre bout lasting up to an hour, the first flatworm to stab and inseminate its mate becomes the father. All Fruit Loops are the same flavor. You animal. Around 2,500 left-handed people die every year trying to use right-handed tools. There was a science experiment from NASA trying to teach a dolphin English. The male dolphin seemed to begin to fall in love with the female scientist and started to evidently become sexually interested in her. After some negative backlash, funding was cut and the experiment was halted and the two were separated permanently. The dolphin fell into a deep depression and ended up drowning himself. She would jerk him off. That's why funding was cut. I'm not sure if you're serious or not. In Japan, when people commit suicide, they take off their shoes before jumping to tell the police it wasn't a murder. How thoughtful. A man named Hisashi Aoki was experienced extreme amounts of radiation during a nuclear meltdown in Japan. In the end, he had literally no DNA left in his body, but doctors kept him alive for 38 days, which required many blood transfusions and bandages to keep his skin together. Very horrifying story. basically just slowly melting away while begging to die. The pictures are haunting. He looks like a gooey skeleton was. The first person who was sentenced to the electric chair died in an extremely manner. Someone forgot to wet an essential part of the machine and the prisoner ended up with bubbling skin, melting eyes, and foaming mouth among other things. The amount of electricity was so strong that he began to convulse violently where he weakened the straps. He twitched so erratically that his index finger dug through the palm of his hand. The entire room smelled of burning flesh. Many people who came to see had fainted during the execution. The most beeped up part was he could be heard wheezing after they shut the electricity off. There's a scene in the Green Mile where this happens and it's horrifying. I can't imagine witnessing it in real life. That scene's so incredibly disturbing. Also, beep Percy Wetmore. The longest plank ever held is 8 hours 15 minutes and 15 seconds. By a 62-year-old. 17-year-old me with the record of 1 minute. Oh well. Kaiser Wilhelm II made some of his courtiers dress up as dogs and do tricks to amuse himself, technically making him a furry. I am very interested in seeing the source on that. I'm trying to search for more info but can't seem to find anything. The Kaiser and His Court by John R.H.L. has a letter that one courtier sent to another detailing how he'd parade the other dressed as a circus poodle. I'm not on computer right now but I'd be able to send you the full quote in a few days. Most cruise ships have their own morgue, along with swimming pools, golf courses, and jaw-dropping theaters. Most cruise ships are also equipped with a morgue. If any passenger dies while aboard, the ship's crew has to be able to tend to the body and store it until they arrive in port. An estimated 200 people die on cruise ships every year. Just think about that next time you sign up to sail away to paradise. They also function as decent retirement homes, as they take care of cooking and cleaning. The best part is they cost roughly the same as an assisted living facility. Plus you get to travel around the world too. And both are just as deadly in the middle of a pandemic. Founding Father Gouverneur Morris died by trying to perform self-surgery with a whalebone. He tried to use it as a catheter. He stuck it in his pee-pee hole and died from internal injury and infection. Fun. Self-surgery yet. That's what it was. Definitely not anything else. LOL. Till early versions of sounding rods were whale bones. After raping his blindfolded victims, the Golden State Killer would be extremely quiet and pretend he had left the room. When the poor victims would start to move towards the phone or try to untie themselves, he would scare the beeping speep out of them. He would also break into victims' houses multiple times before attacking to rearrange furniture or dresser drawers. Leave rope for when he would eventually tie them up. And go to extreme lengths to creep someone out before attacking. I thought I was still reading the Who in Your Family Ruined Christmas thread. Yet. That's just Uncle Harry with the raping again. We told him the kids are off limits but he just never listens. Water hydras eat an SHT with the same mouth/opening. All in the timing. Women usually have more testosterone than estrogen. It's just that in men the ratio is even more imbalanced. Kinda just more interesting than WTF honestly. You can kill a woman by blowing into her vagina. There was a spate of prostitute deaths in London in the 1980s that was traced to an Irishman doing this. Apparently he'd been recruited by the IRA and was instructed to go and blow up a few English cunts. Happy Crimbo IOU, one paper hat and a plastic toy. Damn it. Take your upvote. A moray eel has two sets of jaws. Much like the xenomorphs in the Alien movie. The first jaw is located in the mouth, which serves as a vice to hold captured prey. The second jaw is located in the throat, called a pharyngeal jaw. This structure is shot forwards at breakneck speeds from the gullet into the mouth to swallow prey. As the eel holds the prey in its first set of jaws, the pharyngeal jaw is quickly shot from the throat, grabs down on the prey. Oh yeah! It has teeth too! And drags it down into the stomach. It's a terrifying thought. A blue whale's tongue can weigh as much as an adult elephant. Thomas Granger was the first juvenile to be executed in what would become the USA. He was convicted of boogery with a mare, a cow, 2 goats, several sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey, and hung in September 1642. Hanged. For execution. People are hanged. Whether he was hung is between him and the mare. I know this is correct, but for some reason I hate it. There are tiny mites that live at the base of your eyelashes. Demodex folliculorum or Demodex brevis if you care to look up what lives there. No. I don't think I will. _ At least we'll never be lonely. A lot of foods, most notably ice cream, have seaweed in them. A specific seaweed, referred to a rockweed where I live, gets harvested and sold to be used as a gelling agent in a lot of foods. Carrageenan. It's also the reason that chocolate milk is thicker than regular milk. Major Sullivan Ballou of the 2nd Rhode Island Volunteers in the American Civil War wrote a beautiful letter to his wife a few days before he was mortally wounded in the First Battle of Bull Run on July 21, 1861. That is very well known today by historians and Civil War enthusiasts. When the area of the battlefield came back under Union control in March of 1862, Governor William Sprague of Rhode Island and a small party of soldiers and officials went to the battlefield to try and recover the bodies of Rhode Island officers killed in the battle. They discovered Ballou's body had been dug up by Confederate soldiers mistaking his body for that of his colonel, John Slocum, and had been decapitated. His body had been boiled and burned to strip flesh and muscle from the body, and his skull and several bones had been taken by Confederate soldiers as trophies. All they could find to bury in Rhode Island was ash, some bones, and scraps of his distinctive plaid shirt. In 1972, French scientists wanted to know how ants responded to radiation, and if any mutations would occur. They placed small pieces of cesium-137 around an ant hill, only to discover half a year later that the ants had relocated the cesium to the inside of their nest and used it for central heating. No mutations or behavioral effects were observed in the ants after 11 months, though flora in the area did die or lost its foliage. The anus is the first body part to develop in the womb. Guess we're all assholes by nature. If you really think about it, humans are just misshapen Tauruses. Frogs cannot vomit. If one absolutely has to, then it will vomit its entire stomach. So frogs can vomit? Yeah. I think the till here is when frogs vomit. They bawl out. Hitler sent out a group tasked with finding the abominable snowman. His goal was to militarize it. Turtles can breathe through their butts. So can I. Exhale mostly. Rainbow Valley on Mount Everest isn't named for the colors of rocks or snow, but for the multitude of colorful jackets of mountaineers that died there. If you feed an anaconda dozens of live chicks, you can hear them peeping from inside the snake for quite some time. How the beep did someone find this out? Did they just have some beeped up hobby? Or an anaconda just ate a bunch of chicks? The sperm cells of the Drosophila fruit fly are up to 6 times longer than the length of their body. More of a high. That's interesting fact. Getting high is pretty common among mammals. Sometimes for recreation. Sometimes to survive trauma. Cats and rabbits chew cords that are plugged in and receiving electricity because they get a high from the zapping. Dogs enjoy sticking their heads out the window while driving because the extra oxygen they get gives them a little high. If you are ever given oxygen at the hospital, you will get a little giddy from it. Horses, when neglected and understimulated, will start a behavior called wind sucking. This behavior has the same premise as dogs with oxygen. They get more oxygen in and get a little giddy. This behavior is very hard to break when rehabbing a horse. They get pretty hooked on it. Dolphins play with pufferfish and they also get a little high from whatever toxin they produce that kills humans. If anyone knows any other examples of getting high in the animal kingdom, I'd love to know. Elephants were believed to eat the fermented marula fruits to get drunk. However, their obvious intoxication probably is induced by the toxic cocoons of a bug living in that tree. Yes. You have reminded me. Whether intentional or not, lots of animals get drunk on fermented fruits. Robert Liston is famous for performing the only operation with a 300% mortality rate. This is in the era of theater surgery. During one operation in particular, while trying to be swift with his blade, he managed to cut off his assistant's fingers, which they later died from infection. Additionally, a spectator got his clothes clipped by the blade and died of a heart attack. Oh, and the patient died too. Edited for accuracy. Hershey's chocolate bars have a non-zero limit for how many bug legs they can contain. This is true for most food actually. The FDA allows up to 1 1/2 of small insects for any cup of grain or rice processed. There was a science experiment where 40 newborn babies were put in a facility and only given food and water with no human contact after they were able to feed and take care of themselves. They all passed away before the age of 18 due to every one of them having a multitude of different mental disorders due to lack of affection or human contact along with the pure boredom. But before they died, they invented Reddit. The Senate all has been getting paychecks and healthcare this entire pandemic and won't come off of more than $1,200 so people can pay their rent and eat. But having money to live off of during a pandemic that Congress themselves beeped up would be socialism. And socialism is bad. Oh. And they're among the first to get vaccinated. Every year there are between 80 to 100 million more people alive on the planet than the previous year. Look. We are doing the best we can. But they just keep breeding. They practically have holidays dedicated to sex. Regarding men's testicles, it's normal for one testicle to hang lower than the other. The left is often lower than the right. A slight difference in size is also normal. The right testicle tends to be larger than the left. One hangs lower so they don't touch, because that would be gay. And they were scrotum mates. During World War II, HMAS Sydney saw a suspicious freighter. The commander was under conflicting orders. If he judged it to be a harmless German freighter, he was to get as close as possible to stop and possibly board it before it could be scuttled. If he judged it to be a commerce raider in disguise, he was to keep as much distance as possible to allow his own weapons, speed and armor to be used to best advantage. He opted for the first. And it was a commerce raider cormoran. Both ships sunk each other in the battle. Sydney was lost with all hands. Sharks puke out their whole stomachs when they're stressed out. Every movie could be considered a sequel or a prequel to Jurassic Park if you consider them stories independent of what's going on with the dinosaurs. I'm going to tell folks that Jurassic Park and The Notebook are set in the same universe.